Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 341 for the 3rd of May 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, we have a special guest reporter, Josh Godbee, who's a committee member of Australian Skeptics here in Sydney. Lucky man, he went to QED in Manchester. He went to the wonderful conference there. I've been a couple of times myself. I always have a good time. And he catches up with our good friend Michael Marshall. They're going to be discussing what it's like to run a conference like QED and how it went, and also the latest on the situation in the UK with homeopathy. Oh, the old chestnut of homeopathy. Talk about an unsinkable rubber duck. Homeopathy is certainly one of those. No matter how many times we push it under the water, it pops back up again. Following that, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia. An outfit worthy of your support. Check it out, www.riaus.org.au. Then Jo Alabaster with evidence, please. Jo's going to be looking at a very sad situation that happened last week here in Australia with a young boy dying. And the fear is that his parents took him off real medication and were trying some pretty outlandish and frankly bizarre alternative therapies. What was it? Something like slapping therapy. Yes, slapping to create bruises. Yes, that'll cure your diseases. Not a good story, not a happy story, but one we should report on. Then to round off the show, I chat to a good friend of mine, Alison Gaylard from the Northern Rivers area. Alison and Heidi and a lot of people came into Sydney just last week to attend a one-day conference on immunisation, and I went along too. I interviewed some people on the spot, learnt a lot on the day, had a lot of good speakers, chatted to a lot of good people, and we'll be talking about that at the end of the show. Alison Gaylard joins me all the way from Mullumbimby, which I think is probably underwater at the moment because I've had a huge amount of rain. And as I look out the window here in Sydney, Australia, it's cloudy and wet and rainy. Big shout out to Daphne Alabaster, who had her birthday just the other week, and I went up to the Blue Mountains and took part in her birthday celebrations. Happy birthday, Daphne. I loved that cake. And congratulations to Armin Balstani, who is the winner of the competition we had from last week, the book. You win the book from New Scientist, Question Everything. Now, that was a Facebook competition we were running, and we invited people to post an interesting question that they would like science to answer. We had some very good entries there. Somebody wrote, is there an expected date where the universe will end, or will it just keep going forever? That's a good question. Somebody asked, how is it that there is hair on your arms, legs, and face, eyebrows, that grows to a certain length and stops? Why the hair on your head and chin keep growing? Somebody else asked, the sun is about halfway through its life. Before it dies, it will expand and take out Mercury, Venus, and perhaps Earth. But how long will it be before the sun becomes too hot for life to exist on Earth? Well, a long time to come yet, I hope. Thank you to all those people. But the winning entry was a very simple sentence. Does language limit our understanding of science? What an interesting question. What an interesting question, because people who speak other languages or 2 or 3 languages, do they have a greater understanding or not? That's something worth pondering. Congratulations, I'm in, and we'll organise that book to you. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, open the fridge, and see if I haven't got a couple of leftover crumbs from the lovely rainbow birthday cake that Jo Alabaster made for Daphne, her daughter. Wow, what a great cake it was. And the rainbow cookies we had too. And I had a cup of rainbow jelly, or jello as they say in the United States, with whipped cream on top and rainbow popcorn. Yes, it was a very rainbow-themed party. Well, I do that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now join our special guest reporter, Josh Godbee from Australian Skeptics, as he chats to Michael Marshall.
So I'm here with Michael Marshall of the Merseyside Skeptics, one of the organisers and speakers at this year's QED. How are you travelling with what I'm sure, after what I'm sure was a very hectic weekend?
Yeah, I am absolutely knackered. This whole week I've been trying to sort of keep it together, because that's the thing, I absolutely love doing conferences. You know, it's really good fun, and you know, because you've done the Aussie Skeptics.
Yes,
the whole weekend's a massive amount of fun, but you're on your feet from like 7 in the morning till about 2 in the morning for like 4 days straight, and then afterwards your whole brain is just broken, and that's the position that I'm in now, and I think I'm starting to get my brain back this week, really. But yeah, it was a huge amount of fun. So you came all the way from Australia for it?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. It's, you've got to reciprocate attendance
and also spy on things that we're doing.
Well, of course. I mean, when something works, you want to steal it, obviously.
But I hope you enjoyed it as well. Then it was. Everyone seems to have kind of enjoyed the whole conference, I think.
Yeah, the vibe was really quite good. It was really helpful. Like, one of the things I guess we'll learn for ours in future is. Have a bar very close by, because it is like it makes the vibe that much more positive, where people can just sit around.
Well, we found that what tends to happen is, especially people who've been to a lot of QEDs will start ducking out of talks just so they can sit and kind of like chat and have a drink and sort of relax during the day. And really, I think that's what we were trying to do with QED. That the speakers are always great fun and really interesting, but they're really an excuse to get everyone together. And then once you got everyone together, what I'm really, really hoping happens is that we get 550, 600 people together at QED, and they'll see some interesting talks, but then they'll sit down and have a drink, and maybe some ideas will start forming, or they'll realise that I've got this one piece of this issue, you've got the other piece of it, we can now start to see what's going on. So it's a reason to bring skeptics together and say that we're all part of the same thing. And yeah, the speakers are all huge fun, but for me that's kind of, it's not secondary, but it's certainly kind of two parallel competing interests, I think.
So I guess related to that, some of the talk on the weekend was about incorporating the bar area into it by live streaming or anything like that. Is that something you guys have thought of?
Yeah, we've thought a bit, but the thing is, that means that when you're in the bar and you get to sort of see all the talks while staying in the bar, that's great. But what it means, the flip side, is that the speaker doesn't get an audience, because you end up going in front of a massive room that could accommodate everyone. But everyone's thought, well, it's fine, I'll just go next door and sit in the bar and see it. So it's really, really important to us that you keep that audience together, and it's why we don't live stream the event to people who can't make it. We record the talks and we put them out a bit afterwards, because we want to say being at QED itself is a value, and you want to sort of keep that kind of value there. So, yeah, I don't think we're quite going to move to a point where you can sit in your hotel room and still be at QED. We want to actually get people out of bed and get people actually there. I think that's what kind of matters, really. So
you did a talk on the Sunday morning after a very late Saturday night, or Sunday morning as it may have been. So your talk was on the status of homeopathy in the UK. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice to open QED talking about homeopathy on the Sunday, because the first QED that we did, I opened talking about the homeopathy. That was the second 1023 campaign, the international overdose, which obviously Australia was a big part of, and Paul Willis was even in Antarctica putting a dot on the map, which I talk about all the time. But ever since then, for the last 5 years, I've been talking about the talks that I've been given and kind of culminated with the 1023 campaign. So I thought it'd be really interesting to do a talk that started with 1023 and looks at the last 5 years of kind of homeopathy activism, and in particular the last year, because it's something that with Good Thinking Society, the charity that I work for, it's something we've really been focusing on. As soon as I started working for them just over a year ago, this was kind of a big focus of ours of what can we do to, first of all, understand what's going on in homeopathy in the UK. How much money are we spending? And that was it seems like a simple question. How much money does the UK government spend on homeopathy? And it turns out it's a really complicated question. You've got to ask every different region of the country. And even though we're a tiny country compared to Australia, we're split into 211 different regions and sub-regions and all sorts of things. And none of them have any singular oversight. So nobody knows what anyone else is doing. And there's no one Department of Health that says that, well, there is a Department of Health, but they don't look at the spends everywhere, and they don't sort of see what's being commissioned at a national level. So the only way to know that figure is you've got to ask everyone individually and collate those figures and then hope that they've all interpreted your question the right way. And so I spent about 3 or 4 months really going at the depths of how to get these figures together, and I think I've got a reasonable handle. That's one of the things that I showed was kind of, here's a map of the UK. And when we talk about homeopathy being funded in the UK, you look at the map, and it's pretty clear that we don't fund homeopathy in the UK. We fund it in about 4 small areas. To about 15% of areas of the country actually fund it, and the rest don't. So we're already 85% clear of homeopathy, and we're just now trying to sort of dislodge that extra 15%, which is kind of what the rest of our kind of campaign and our activism has been all about.
Going on that 15%, part of your presentation showed just how much is actually being spent on just that 15%. Can how much is being spent?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's a tricky thing to be sure about. So we know that in Liverpool, where I live, in the surrounding areas, it's about £60,000 a year, which is it's a bit. It's not huge, but it's still annoying. In Newcastle, it's £250 a year, which is nothing. I mean, one part of Newcastle spent £3.27 a year on homeopathy, and I pointed out in my presentation that I spent more than that every single year, and I know that it's nonsense. So that's not the worst thing. But then you go down to Bristol, the Bristol area, they spend £250,000 a year. You go up to Glasgow, and that's somewhere between £1.3 and £1.7 million a year. And then you get to London, and we have no idea. Because no matter who I asked involved in the chain of supplying homeopathy, from the NHS to the homeopathic hospital, which we have, to the suppliers, everybody you ask, they say, we don't have those figures, we can't know those figures are essentially unknowable. So there's this big black hole in our figures. So we've managed to get to at least £2 million a year, but it could be upwards to, at an estimate, maybe £5 million a year, as far as we can tell. And we're still trying to get those figures out of London right now, and hopefully we'll get somewhere as we keep putting pressure on, really. Yeah,
so I guess for our Aussie listeners, that's anywhere between about 10 and 15 million Australian dollars.
Yeah, well, between maybe 5 and 10, I guess. Yeah, 5 and 10, so 2 to 5, or maybe about 5 to 10-ish, something like that.
It's one of those things.
I can't do the conversion rate. It's far too much. I mean, this is the thing, is that... So if you look even at Newcastle, £250 a year, nothing at all. But the problem is, it's not just the actual value, and the actual value is not insignificant. Between £2 and £5 million a year, $4 and $10 million a year, that's money that could be spent on something better. On making sure that we have shorter waiting lists, and we pay nurses better, or there are people who we've heard from who've had treatments turned down for budgetary reasons. And every one of those people can point to the spend on homeopathy and say, well, what's that all about? I'm not allowed this thing that the doctor said could use, but I can't have it because they haven't got the money. And yet we're throwing money at sugar pills that we know full well doesn't do anything, that the government has commissioned a report in 2010 that came up with the conclusion that it does nothing. Obviously, your government has come up with an incredibly comprehensive report this year, again highlighting it does nothing. It's time to get rid of that. So the spend itself, that money could go better. Even when it's a small amount to spend, the irritating thing is it's the symbolic nature of that. Because in Newcastle, you could probably go into a homeopath, and if you ask them, does this work, they could legitimately tell you, well, it's on the NHS.
Yeah.
And even if it just means that there's £250 a year in that entire city and areas around it, the fact that it's still technically true that you can get homeopathy on the NHS in the northeast of England is enough to give it that undue legitimacy. And I think this is the real problem for us, that the NHS will fund this, so people say that. Our pharmacies have homeopathy in them. I mean, you've been in Boots, our chemist recently. Boots will have homeopathy. I mean, they've got everything else.
Yeah.
It's the single biggest kind of chemist you'll ever see.
Largest chemist shop I think I've ever seen. And we've got some large ones in Australia, but seriously, the one here in Liverpool was ridiculous.
They are absolutely. It's like a whole sort of massive supermarket or hypermarket or something like that. But this is the thing, is that they're there because they were a incredibly trusted brand that became on. It was on every high street, and people knew that you could go into Boots and get good health advice. And yet they're selling sugar pills. So the problem is, people will go into Boots and they'll see homeopathy on the shelf and they'll assume that means that it must work, because nobody's telling them it doesn't. And in fact, if you speak to some of the employees of Boots, and it very much differs depending on which Boots you're in, but I've been around the country doing Skeptics in the Pub talk, so I always pop into Boots and ask them about homeopathic hay fever remedies. And I've maybe asked in 15 or 20 Boots, and the range of opinions you get, the range of advice you get from people whose job it is to give you advice, ranges all the way from someone saying that, well, homeopathy thinks the more you dilute it, the stronger it gets. And that's theoretically weak. Because they obviously don't want to offend you because it's their job. But the other side of it is, I was in one and I was told that it works just like a vaccine. You give someone a little bit of something and it'll kind of make them better. And to be honest, it's not chemical based. So given the choice, I'd always choose this because it's natural. And they were just making out that it actually worked. And I think she probably did believe it worked. Whether she totally understood it, I don't know. So Boots does have this range of dodgy advice that's there, or this whole range of advice that goes from good to dodgy. And the problem is, Boots will not sell you something for something serious. They won't sell you homeopathy for something serious. They absolutely won't. They'll sell you it for headaches and bruising and hay fever. I get hay fever. It's pretty annoying, but it's not going to detrimentally affect my health on the long term. But the problem is that because people go into Boots and see homeopathy there, and because they know it's on the NHS, maybe the next time they're ill, they see a homeopath because they've seen that word around. They've got a kind of a familiarity with that word. And we know that homeopaths will give you dangerous advice, and this is something else that we've been really looking into.
So you've also, part of your talk, you spoke about what specific actions you're taking in Liverpool, both yourself and the Good Thinking Society. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing here specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been a really big campaign for us, and it's kind of the first thing that we've done really publicly that shows the pragmatic and systematic approach that we're trying to take to skepticism, because we asked all around the country to figure out how much is spent, and we got our figures back. And so, well, that's interesting. Now we know that's useful, it's data, but we're not going to stop at just knowledge. We need to take that an extra step. So we looked at where there were clusters of these spends, these 15% where they're still funded. And then we looked at the contract decisions. So basically, when someone signs a new contract to fund homeopathy, in this country you get 3 months to review that decision as a member of the public if it's government money being spent on it. So if you think that it's unlawful, you can take them to a judicial review, which is a very complicated, very kind of weighty legal procedure. But it's a very kind of thorough legal procedure. So we found that in December of last year, Liverpool signed a new contract to commission homeopathy. That started the timer ticking. We had 3 months to figure out what our case would look like, to make our case and submit it. So we started just pulling documents anywhere we could about Liverpool. I went back over about 2 years' worth of meeting agendas and minutes, and we sent them emails using freedom of information to say, when you've spoken about this issue in internal conversations, in internal email exchanges, we need to see all of that. So we did all that. We had a look at all their policies. And we found something really interesting. So at the start of 2014, they commissioned this review to say, here are 5 different complementary therapies that we're looking to stop funding. That we're looking to see whether we should fund or not. And at the end of that review, 3 months in, they came back and said, actually, we've looked at it, you shouldn't be funding this. We propose that we stop funding these 5 different therapies, including homeopathy. And then they said, right, we've got that result. We're going to put the idea that we're going to stop funding it, we're going to put that out to the public and see what the public think. 4 months later, they had a public consultation where any member of the public who cares, be they homeopath, patient, skeptic, anyone, could offer their advice on whether they should or shouldn't, whether they should accept the recommendation to stop funding homeopathy. And at the end of that 4 months, they had 6 responses. None of them mentioned homeopathy at any point. Most of them were about the other therapies, things like that. So it seemed pretty clear that there wasn't a good reason to, that they were recommending to get rid of it, and people weren't that passionate about it. And yet, in December 2014, they decided to commission it anyway. So they turned all of their other decision-making and advice completely on its head. So we wrote an entire kind of judicial review pointing out that you were consulting about whether to get rid of it, and now you've decided to fund it, and you've done a 180 on all the advice. This seems to us to be unlawful. We also kind of pointed out a few other things. So they were saying things like it's about patient satisfaction, and we know that patient satisfaction isn't a good enough reason to give patients something that doesn't work. Because you can make sure that patients can be very, very satisfied with the level of service they're getting if they don't know that service is bullshit. But if you say, how satisfied are you with the thing I've just given you? By the way, it's just sugar. I'm pretending it'll work. They get a lot less satisfied,
Start to get a bit annoyed, really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with patient choice. People say, it needs to be available for patient choice. And we absolutely believe that patient choice is crucial. But you can't give someone a choice between something that works and something that doesn't, and not tell them which is which, and that still be a choice. It's not a choice at all. It raises real questions about the nature of informed consent if you've given someone a remedy that does nothing, and you're not telling them it does nothing. That's not giving them the information that they need to make a good decision. And people aren't experts. I'm no expert. And it's important that we're given the right information to make these decisions. So they'd laid out all these different reasons. as to why they were going to fund it. We kind of counted all of those. And they, in early April, eventually said, actually, you know what? We concede. We can see that some people might think that there were flaws in our decision-making process, which is a fantastic way of wording things, I think. It's like, we're not wrong, but we are going to stop.
We can see how other people might think we were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, politically, that's kind of that's probably the most sensible position. So I can completely understand that, and they haven't admitted any fault, and we wouldn't want to say that they've admitted any fault either. We wouldn't want to give that impression. But the good thing is, it means they've now said, after the election, which is coming up in just over a week now, they've said we're going to go back and we're going to do the consultation again. And we know that in that consultation, it's going to be very, very hard for them to use the arguments they've used last time, because we've said those arguments were weak enough for us to feel confident putting together a very expensive legal procedure against you. So we think this is a good shot at getting homeopathy off Liverpool. We can work with my local volunteer groups, the Merseyside Skeptic Society. Good thinking, going to work with them to make sure we get lots of local people involved in that consultation, because now we know it's happening. The homeopaths are certainly going to be there. The homeopathic lobbyists, the patients, we get to then put people on the other side and say, well, actually, here's a big petition of people who think this money could be better spent elsewhere. Here's a lot of people who believe that evidence and science is important in our healthcare and not just choice in a vacuum. So we should hopefully be able to balance out that consultation, because what we don't want to seem is like we're putting pressure on the commissioners. I really don't think we are. What we've done is we've given the commissioners the opportunity to make a fair decision here. And we know that they're under pressure from the homeopaths who've been banging on at them for ages. In fact, one of the reasons that they said they were continuing funding was that they were worried about the threat of legal procedures if they ceased funding, which is not a very good reason to carry on spending money on something that doesn't work. So what we're trying to do is to say, yes, you're going to get all this weight from homeopaths, but you've also got this weight from us. And if you can just, at this point, say, well, you've got pressure over here, pressure over there, so the only thing we can do is step back and look at the evidence, we're pretty confident that the evidence is on our side too. So we're trying to balance the opposing forces more than anything else.
And so that campaign, I guess, is obviously ongoing then.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was a really significant step in Liverpool. It was really hard to kind of explain to people how significant it is, because people think, well, it's Liverpool, and they're still going to go back and make the decision again, so have you really done anything? And what's really nice is that now that the media started to pick up on this, there was a big national headlines in the Telegraph newspaper saying homeopathy under review because of our campaign. And it is under review, because what we've said is we've got this out of Liverpool CCG. We think it's going to be very hard for them to make the same decision again. And now we've written to every other CCG's clinical commissioning group. It's part of the small groups that make up the NHS. So we've written to all of the other ones that fund homeopathy and said, look at this in Liverpool. We want to see copies of your contract so we know when you're going to renew your contract. And we invite you to consider what we're doing, because what we'd really like is for them to be able to reconsider what they're doing before we have to undertake this lengthy, potentially expensive kind of thing. Yeah. And we think this is a really good opportunity. So I'm going to be working with skeptics all around the UK to try and find ways of finding locals in various different areas who are very interested in this. And hopefully we can actually put ourselves as a skeptical community, as a voice in this argument, right on the map, right in the middle of the decision-making process.
So did you get any feelers from people in the other areas during QED? So did you get anyone from Newcastle?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was contacted. What was great was you get up in front of an audience of 550, 600 people, and you talk about this, and you talk about why you think this matters and the work you're doing and how exciting it is when you get a victory. And immediately you get off stage, you get people coming up to you. So you have people saying, oh, you need those figures. I think I can help. You need to get this piece of information out of this pharmacy. You need a doctor to do it. I'm a doctor. Tell me how I can help. So I think what so many people in the skeptical community are looking for is a campaign to get behind. And once you've got that idea, people are like, right, I think I know how I can use my skill set to support that campaign. And that's what we're really trying to do with good thinking, is to be that kind of lightning rod for people's talents. So we're not here to tell anybody what to do, but we're here to go, we've got this idea. What do you think you could do to help? And do you want to help? And I think if we do that, then people will naturally say, well, I do this, I do that. We had a guy who made our intro video at QED was saying, all that data you had there is really interesting. Let's get it out there as wide as possible. Maybe you could start putting together a video, a 30-second, 1-minute infographic video that'll just explain all these stats in a really easy way. So you can just send that to people and people can watch it. It's very, very easy to comprehend. So we need all sorts of skills. We can sort of coalesce them around, and hopefully in the middle we can sort of network enough to make this a coherent campaign.
So I guess on the lighter side of your talk, You spoke about some of the weirder homeopathic remedies which you were able to get from a provider here in the UK.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. Yeah, so there's this amazing thing. So in part of my kind of freedom of information request, I was asking about not only how much do you spend, but where do you get it from? We got Bristol Homeopathic Hospital, absolutely ludicrous idea. And they were getting their remedies, about £30,000 a year, from Glasgow Homeopathic Hospital, who got them from Freeman's Homeopathic Pharmacy. So I spoke to Glasgow. They have an exclusive contract with Freeman's Homeopathic Pharmacy. So I called Freeman's, because I looked at their website, and they've got the longest list of just crazy stuff on there, absolutely insane stuff. It really, really is. It's homeopathic blue, the colour blue, homeopathic MRI scan, where they've taken some water and put it in an MRI scan, and then they dilute that. Homeopathic sunlight, where they put water in sunlight. Absolutely bizarre. So I phoned them up and thought, are they really going to sell you, homeopathic asbestos, homeopathic uranium, homeopathic beetle? Are they really going to sell you this stuff? So I had them on the phone. I actually played the phone conversation during my QED talk. I'm hoping to release the video of it soon. But I asked them about homeopathic owl, which on there, I think it was a horned owl that I was particularly interested in. And I said, so you've got a homeopathic owl on there. How do you make a homeopathic remedy from an owl? And they said, well, you take the feathers and then you dilute it, and that's kind of how you do it. Put the feathers in water, use that water and dilute it. I was saying, is that for people who are allergic to owls? And they went, yeah, it could be if you're allergic to owls, but mainly it's for people who've taken on the characteristics of an owl. I was like, really? Is that what does that mean? She said, well, you might not be able to sleep at night, or because you can take on the characteristics of an owl. That's not being an owl. That's insomnia. It's not being an owl. But she did tell me you can't buy it without prescription. And I kind of took her word for it. And then a couple of weeks later I thought, is that true? So I got back in touch and I bought some homeopathic owl that I had with me on the weekend. And I was holding it up in front of the audience. And I also had from another pharmacy, homeopathic sunlight. From another one, I had homeopathic X-ray. And then it gets, as far as we can tell, these are all unlicensed medicines. So there is not a license to sell these in the UK, because the way the licensing works, you have to have a one-on-one consultation with either a registered medical expert or someone with a very specific license to do this one-on-one consultation. And from there, you have to make a remedy up for them, like actually create one there. So you can't sell them off the shelf, and you can't see them out talking to them in person, which I didn't do. I bought them off the internet. So as far as we can tell, this is unlicensed. It's unlawful, and it's practicing medicine without a license. And that's something we're really, really interested in. But it gets really bad because one of the ones I bought, which was a fairly standard homeopathic unlicensed remedy, was from Nutricentre, which is a health food chain owned by Tesco, the major supermarket. So the biggest supermarket chain pretty much in this country sells unlicensed medicine in an unlawful act, which is incredible. And I also bought, and this is perhaps the worst one, this is from a homeopathic supplier online, about homeopathic diabetes medicine. This just shows you that people are still doing this for really dangerous stuff. So this is another area that we're kind of looking at. But yeah, I think I'll carry around my homeopathic owl as often as possible.
Make sure you stay awake on those long nights.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to us today, Michael.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, and if people want to find out more about our campaign, if you go to goodthinkingsociety.org, you'll find out there. At the moment, we're kind of fundraising to help us kind of fund further legal battles and things like that. We've got a Just Giving page. So if you go to goodthinkingsociety.org, you should be able to find all of that there.
And you guys should help out.
If you can.
Okay,
right.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Around 1 in 20 children and 1 in 50 adults have food allergies, and there's also allergies to bee stings, pollen and pet hair. But what actually happens when you have an allergic... Simply put, an allergic reaction is when your immune system reacts to something in the environment which is normally harmless. The best understood allergic reaction involves molecules in the immune system called antibodies. When the allergen, the substance causing the allergic reaction, enters the body, the immune system activates and the antibodies bind to the allergen. The antibody most commonly involved in allergic reactions is called IgE. When there is enough IgE binding to the allergen, immune cells called mast cells start releasing histamine, which results in inflammation. and other chemicals which ramp up the immune system response. The result is a large immune system response causing inflammation and swelling, tightening of the airway muscles, and depression of the heart muscles. Hospital admissions for severe allergic reactions have doubled in Australia over the last decade, and hospital admissions for children with food allergies have gone up even higher. There are some suggestions for why this increase has occurred. It may be that we're being too hygienic and not exposing children to as many infectious agents, so the immune system is instead being active against more allergens. Another hypothesis is that it could be caused by delaying introduction of possible allergen foods such as nuts and eggs into a child's diet, rather than desensitising their immune systems early. And now, 4 fast facts about allergic reactions. Children can grow out of some food allergies, including milk or eggs, but less commonly grow out of seafood or nut allergies. You can also develop allergies later in life, and unfortunately there's no definitive reason why this occurs. There is no evidence that restricting a mother's diet during pregnancy or breastfeeding reduces the risk of a child developing food allergies. And someone having a serious allergic reaction should be given an epinephrine injection, which counteracts the more dangerous symptoms. That's it for this A Week in Science. For more about allergies, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you next week.
You can always count on the skeptics in Canberra. The Canberra Skeptics come up with some good talks, free talks for the general public. And coming up on the 15th of May, starting time at 6 p.m, location Ainsley Football Club in Wakefield in the ACT, our very own Iran Sagev, Skeptic Zone reporter and president of Australian Skeptics. The topic of his talk will be unskepticism in education. Sounds like an interesting talk, and that will be followed by dinner. RSVP for the dinner. Send an email to mail@canberraskeptics.org.au. Later on in the year, we have some more talks coming up. Dr. Michael Smithson will be talking on the 15th of June, a talk entitled, When Can Ignorance Be Good for You? I don't know. And then on the 13th of July, we have Lara Nichols with her talk, Not Just Dollars, the Hidden Reason du Jour of the Art Forger. The admission is free, which is good because you'd normally have to pay with counterfeit money. So lots of interesting talks coming up for the Canberra Skeptics. Head to canberraskeptics.org.au for more information. What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. The media has been reporting that a very sad and rather distressing event has taken place in Sydney this week, in which a 7-year-old boy whose parents brought him to the seminar of a visiting practitioner of alternative medicine has died the evening following his attendance of a Peter and Lanjing self-healing workshop. The boy, who it is understood had diabetes, attended a workshop run by practitioner Hongqi Zhao, who advocated some rather worrying methods for the treatment of medical conditions. Hongqi Zhao developed what he refers to as Peter and Lanjing self-healing, which can be used for almost all diseases, in which slapping and patting the body and stretching tendons is claimed to promote healing. Zhao claims that repeatedly slapping one part of the body, quote, builds heat, causing blood vessels to expand and qi to flow strongly. Yang rises, yin melts, and long-held toxins and blocks are released, end quote. Video testimonials on Zhao's website show people slapping themselves until they are bruised. There were reports of people vomiting and falling unconscious. Testimonials also mentioned of parents using the slapping technique on their children. Zhao, who is from China, has been touring Australia and presenting workshops on his method. Reportedly, the week-long Sydney workshop cost $1,800 to attend. He is believed to have left Australia after being questioned by police regarding the death of the 7-year-old boy. Obviously, we're not in a position to say precisely what happened to the boy, beyond reports that he and his parents attended the workshop, that he was very unwell afterward, and that he passed away in an ambulance that evening. For any details beyond that, and before we go forming any certain conclusions on this specific case, I think that we must await the coroner's investigation and subsequent report. Based on the news reports, though, it's very difficult not to have an emotional response to this story. I certainly have. The Telegraph have reported that the boy was made to fast for days before the workshop, and it is possible that his insulin was withdrawn as part of the Peter and Lejeune protocol, and the notion of repeatedly hitting a young child is frankly incredibly sickening to me. I'll check in again on this case after the coroner has performed an investigation and their report has been made public. Until then, a note for our overseas listeners. Hongqi Zhao is scheduled to conduct workshops in Saalhausen, Germany later this month, in Hong Kong in June, in Bandung in Indonesia in June and July, and then in Seattle in the USA in August. Should his tours still go ahead, please keep an eye on him. Unfortunately, he slipped under the radar for us here in Australia, but perhaps if he's scheduled to visit where you live, if you're in Germany, Hong Kong, Indonesia or the United States, you'll be able to let people know what his methods involve and their potentially dangerous outcomes. Thank you.
Hi there, Ross Balch here with an Australian Skeptics National Convention update. This week we are excited to announce our final group of speakers. From the USA, we are joined by veteran skeptic campaigner Eugenie Scott. We're also pleased to welcome Theo Clark and Chrissy Wilson. Dave Hawkes will be joining our Parenting Skeptically panel, and I am pleased to introduce your host for the event, Imaginary Friend Show producer Jake Farwharton and skeptical activist and writer Chris Stevenson. Don't forget our other speakers, Brian Schmidt, Joe Nicol, Susan Gerbic, Miles Power, Lynn Kelly, Katan Joshi, Loretta Maron, John Cook, Mel Thompson, Peter Ellerton, Signa Kane, Holly Warland, and our Parenting Skeptically panel, Jo Alabaster, Lauren Cochran, and Alison Gaylard. I'll also be giving a presentation. Make sure you arrive in Brisbane early. Our Friday Skepticamp speaker roster is fully booked, with some great submissions, and the welcome event has an evening packed with entertainment. Tickets are on sale now at convention.brisbaneskeptics.org. Ensure your seat at the front row with our premium and early bird tickets. Do you want to help a student or pensioner attend the event? You can donate a half or full concession ticket. The Australian Skeptics National Convention will take place on the 16th to the 18th of October this year in Brisbane. See you there.
Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I was lucky enough to go along to the Immunisation Advocacy Workshop. Now, there's a mouthful. That was at the University of New South Wales on the 28th of April. And it was so good to see so many of my friends turn up. They flew in from all over the place, including from the Northern Rivers area, up there in Mullumbimby, which we talk about from time to time, Alison Gaylard. And Alison joins me on the line now. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty well today. I'm having an interesting day. It's wet here in Sydney, and I hear on the news report this morning that there's big storms heading your way.
Yes, we're battening down the hatches.
And I know what it's like when it really, really rains in Mullumbimby. It's quite something to see.
Yeah, it was quite a drive doing the school run this morning, let me tell you.
That takes me back. That takes me back. Now, let's talk about the day. You and Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group flew down together with some other people. Who did you have in tow?
We flew down with Rachel Heap and Kathy McGrath, who are also involved with the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group.
And it's such a good thing that you did that, to come in for the day. Now, this day was put on by the the NHMRC, Centre for Research Excellence in Population and Health Research, that's a mouthful, Public Health Association, and I've just got the little booklet in front of me here, and I believe it was sponsored by the federal government.
Yes. What they were wanting to do was address the issue of vaccine hesitancy nationally in Australia, but not just people that are nervous about vaccinations, but also within the Indigenous communities and migrant communities as well. So it was really interesting because we saw it from a different perspective.
What an interesting day it was. It was the morning session, and we had some morning tea, then the midday session and the whole afternoon sessions with separate workshops. The whole day dedicated to helping get the message out to communities how important vaccination is, and as you mentioned, finding ways to tackle people who are hesitant about vaccination. And I do like that word. It doesn't mean they're deniers like some of the people we battle, who can't listen to reason, but they're probably at some level quite understandably hesitant or questioning because of all the bad information they get.
Well, that's right. And what was also good that Stop the AVN were involved in the day as well, because they battle to eliminate the misinformation that's out there. And if they carry on doing the marvellous job that they are doing, it makes our job a lot easier when we're talking to hesitant parents about vaccinating their families, because it lessens the likelihood of them being fed misinformation, and that they can then get their information from credible sources.
Absolutely, and Stop the AVN, or Stop the Australian Vaccination Network, as they're known, or it's interesting that, as our listeners know, the Australian Vaccination Network were made to change their name to the Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network. It's interesting that they got a lot of shout-outs and a lot of mentions, actually, from speakers during the day, and they were pointed out by one speaker who just escapes me at the moment as a great example of people who are really out there making a difference and doing it in the right way. Yes,
I believe the person that made a comment in that regard was a paediatrician or a GP from another state, and it was just so lovely to hear because Stop the AVN do face a lot of criticism in the methods that they choose. But like they've always said, they're only there to stop the AVN. They're not there to advocate for vaccines. They're not there to offer advice or information. They are there to stop an organisation and similar organisations. It's not just limited to the AVSN. It's so that people can make informed choices correctly.
Absolutely, and after all these years, I think they're very effective indeed, and we can see that. But what I'll do now is I'll play some interviews I captured on the day, starting with our own dear friend and reporter for the Skeptic Zone, Heidi Robertson. Well, here we are at the vaccination conference. Heidi Robertson, hello.
Hi.
Having a good day. Waving to people on stage.
No, I'm just looking up at the screen, a couple of our Northern Rivers vaccination supporters.
No visit. Look at that on the big screen.
Things are up on the big screen here, yeah.
Now, why have you come down here today?
Come down just as a support to Dr. Rachel Heap, who was on a panel today for a immunisation workshop. The panel specifically was on vaccine hesitant parents and how to address...
Which we've just seen, and it was quite a good, interesting panel.
It was excellent. Yeah. Excellent. We had Dave Hawkes from Stop the AVN on the panel, our Dr. Rachel Heap. We had Katie Atwell from I Immunise Australia, that's also a grassroots organisation, and a paediatrician as well. So, it was very, very good, very interesting.
It's really good to see you come down. You've come down here with Alison Gaylard, who's just over there. You flew down all the way from the Northern Rivers just to attend this conference.
Yeah. This is what we've been wanting for a couple of years. We've been wanting some attention on the unique cluster that is the Northern Rivers, and the same over in Fremantle and other clusters in Australia. We want some attention and some recognition that we need different strategies to address what's going on in our regions.
I think we'll learn a lot, and we've got lunch now and then the whole afternoon.
Yes, should be good. You're going to talk to Rachel?
I sure am. Well, now I'll grab you for a quick interview while I've got you. For the benefit of our audience, who are you? Where are you from?
My name is Rachel Heap. I am one of the admins of Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters, and I'm also an adult intensive care specialist.
Now, it was a very interesting panel, a discussion we just had then about vaccine hesitancy. Now, this is an interesting term because I'm so used to vaccine deniers or refusers. But vaccine hesitancy is, I sort of quite like it in a way because it sounds like someone you could talk to and discuss things with.
Absolutely, and I don't think it's fair to say that you can't talk to anybody. You can always have a conversation. And the framework of parental attitudes towards vaccination has included a wide range of parental attitudes, including hesitancy and refusal. They're all just people who are scared, who can be reassured if you have access to a culturally appropriate way to have those conversations.
It's interesting you should say that, because earlier in the day we had some people talking about Indigenous issues and saying that it's very important to have the right people to talk to them.
Absolutely. So peer-to-peer conversations are absolutely vital, with the scientists in the background to back up the information to ensure that the message they're sharing is accurate and true, but the power comes from the peer-to-peer conversation. And I consider my job as the sort of the scientific backup from the NRVS is to provide the information for the parents to have peer-to-peer conversations. I'm happy my peer-to-peer conversations is to teach the GPs, to teach the medical students, and to provide the information and to empower our community to have peer-to-peer conversations themselves.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Look, I won't detain you anymore because we both have to step out and get some lunch.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's no surprise that I should bump into Peter Ratbags Bowditch here at the conference. How are you finding it so far?
I'm finding it very interesting so far. It's certainly very useful stuff.
It is, and it's so nice to be somewhere where people are having a rational, sane conversation about vaccination.
It is. But obviously, none of us are going to agree with everything that's said today, but because I think we've all got different approaches to solving this problem.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think definitely getting this sort of thing, these sort of people together is definitely worthwhile, because we're hearing various opinions about how people can go about getting the word about vaccination out there, getting to the people who are hesitant, getting to the people who are actually refusing, and basically making us all safer and healthier.
It's good, and Stop the Australian Vaccination Network has certainly got a lot of mentions today.
They certainly have, yes.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased about that.
Yes. Come up quite frequently, and the Northern Rivers vaccination people too.
Yeah, well, I think that, I declare my vested interest here, but I think that both those organisations, and the second one, Northern Rivers one, grew out of SAVN.
Yeah.
That we really started it. I mean, I'd been fighting them anti-vaccination people for years, but what we needed was Facebook.
Yes, absolutely right.
I mean, I could write letters to the editor, I could do that. But all of a sudden we had a resource there where we could pull together originally about 1,000 people who, as David said, we weren't just doctors. There were lawyers, there were accountants, there were bureaucrats who know how the bureaucracy works. And we're able to put a whole series of different skills to it. So people knew how to do things. And most of us have never met.
That's true. No, it's interesting because you and I go back to many years ago when I went to that talk with you, the Australian Vaccination Network were running, where I was gobsmacked all those years ago.
Well, that was 2003, I think.
I think it was, and we heard such gems as that the World Health Organization put the Nazis in the shame and things like that.
That's right.
In the shade.
But now there were 350 so people at that seminar. They've gone. They can't hold those seminars anymore.
Yeah.
They can't put all those mothers and their babies and parents into a room and stand there and tell them lies for 2 hours like they did then. It just doesn't work anymore.
It's good. All right, we're holding up people from their lunch. This is a terrible thing. Thanks very much, Peter.
Thank you.
So there's some comments from the day itself. It was quite good. It was quite well attended. What did you learn from the day, Alison?
I picked up some more methods of addressing hesitancy. I learnt a lot from the Indigenous presentations. But as well as that, I think I also learnt that we were able to communicate and get our point across with people who are researchers, who are academics, that may not necessarily be on the ground as we are. So I think it was a great opportunity for us to present what it's like for us at ground zero when we're talking to people, and what we face when we're trying to raise the immunisation levels in the area.
Yeah, it was a really, really useful day all around, and I saw some really interesting people there. It was great to see you, fantastic to see you and Heidi there, of course, and the other members from the organisation. And I've got to thank you, Alison, because you, I twisted your arm, I twisted your vocal cords, and you did the voiceover for the ad I run occasionally for the Vaccination Chronicles DVD, and it was because of that ad being on the Skeptic Zone that our friends in Sweden had the idea to get a copy of the DVD, which is now in Swedish, which is quite exciting. And of course, we've just heard recently that the on YouTube the documentary's been dubbed into Russian. So it's just so gratifying to know that a little bit of effort from our point of view can result in something like this important message getting out around the world.
Oh, most definitely. And something that's become really apparent to me after the media frenzy we've just encountered this last few weeks, when the TV reporters were out on the main street in Mullumbimby interviewing local people about their thoughts on vaccination and the new policy that's coming in here in Australia, I was really surprised at the amount of people that were being interviewed that seemed to be vaccine refusers, but they were of a generation where their children would have already grown up, and they were probably grandparents. So, these are the older people in our society that should actually remember diseases like polio and diphtheria. So it's got me to thinking this last week, and I think I mentioned to you that what Heidi and I are going to do is going to promote the hell out of the Vaccination Chronicles, because I want to remind those people about a period not so long ago that they should still be remembering. And also, as elders of the community, they should be passing that information along, and they're not. So Heidi and I are going to be distributing the DVD at the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters expense. Wow. We're going to, foot the costs. We've bought the DVDs. We're going to do the printing. We're going to cover the postage for local people. And I'll even drop them off at people's houses if I need to. And yes, I want to also get in contact with the local Rotary and Lions clubs. But, they're slightly older people that are normally members. So if we can distribute amongst them, they can pass them on to family and friends. I'm even debating going to the nursing home and giving them a couple of DVDs as well. So, yes, it's really got me thinking.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's so good to know that people out there like you are coming up with ideas to help really what we're doing. When you get down to it, what we're doing is we're promoting good sense and good science. And any way we can do that anywhere around the world, I think it's a very worthwhile thing. So people in your neck of the woods, which is the North Coast area of New South Wales, and I could probably say that the southern bits of Queensland too. So what's the website they should go there to, Alison?
www.nrvs.info is our website. They'll be able to request a DVD from us. I would say that if people are interstate to us, we may have to charge you postage. We're a grassroots group. We have no funding whatsoever. Everything's done out of our own pockets. So, but if it's people in the local area, and even southeast Queensland, like you said, it's not that far over the border. Yeah. I'm happy to foot the postage costs.
That's just fantastic. Well, if people elsewhere in the world, and other parts of Australia, they can always come to the Skeptic Zone website and have a look for the DVD there. But yes, really for the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales where you are, because the version of the DVD I made for you is actually tailored to that area with a special introduction. So that's probably the way to go. Yes,
it is. Yes, you did that wonderful introduction at the beginning, which we've tagged on to the documentary itself. So yeah, it's really particular for this area. But I'd like everyone to see it, to be honest with you, because I'd like everyone to see what it's actually like here.
Yes, it's quite a remarkable thing. I keep threatening to come up and visit. I must do that one day. Well, listen, Alison Gaylard, all the way up there in rainy old, wet, soggy Mullumbimby. Thank you very much for your time today, and thank you very much for making the effort to come down and being part of this important day here in Sydney.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard, and thank you for all your support as well.
Bye now.
Bye.
Raskó Gábor vagyok, a Skeptikus Társaság Egyesület és a Skeptikus Szervezetek Európai Tanácsának elnöke. Mint a Skeptic Zone podcast hallgatója, bizonyára te is fontosnak tartod az áltudományokkal kapcsolatos felvilágosítást, a kritikai gondolkodást és annak népszerűsítését. Ha szeretnél részt venni ilyen tevékenységben, vedd fel velünk a kapcsolatot a www.skeptikustársaság.hu vagy az info@skeptikus.hu címen. Továbbá ajánlom figyelmetbe Facebook oldalunkat is, amit a facebook.com/Skeptikus Társaság címen találsz, valamint várunk szeretettel rendezvényeinken. Hi, this is Gábor Raskó, President of the Hungarian Skeptic Society and Chairman of the European Council of Skeptical Organizations. As a listener of the Skeptic Zone, you probably agree that educating others about pseudoscience and critical thinking is an important task. If you are eager to take part in either of these activities, we would be happy to hear from you. Don't hesitate to contact us at www.skeptikus.hu or info@skeptikus.hu. We also recommend you visiting our Facebook page, Skeptikus Társaság, or simply come and join us at one of our events.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, coming up pretty soon for those people who live in Sydney, if you drop by 2042 Cafe and Deli, which is in King Street, Newtown, from the 11th of May, you'll be able to see an exhibition of my photography. That's very exciting. I've never had an exhibition of my photography before. Drop by, have a coffee, and I hope you enjoy my photography. A big thank you to Josh Godbee for stepping in and being our guest reporter this week. I think you did a great job. Josh, look out. I might ask you to do some more reports in the future. Coming up on the Skeptic Zone, I hope to chat with the one and only James Randi about the upcoming amazing meeting in Las Vegas. Tam again. I'll be there helping out with the $1 Million Challenge as normal, and it'll be great to see Skeptic Zone fans at the amazing meeting. I always have a wonderful time there, and it's nice to meet up with people from all over the world. More details about that coming up. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.